I'm your host Slim bin Mohammed Rafi, and this is your YouTube channel Zamir Universal, because he's worse than that. I don't know if I don't know the words in the English language which will describe how filthy, how dirty he is. Worse than a fecal matter, and throw on his face, and he will die, and his death will never ever be normal. He will be autolyzed, and miles the smell when he will be on the life support, and his wife and son will beg for his death, that at least bury his bones, bury his whatever liquefied flesh he has, and that is Netanyahu. And now it's strange that Gant has also ended. So you see there are hundreds and thousands of dirty and filthy Jews here living in United States, and you see what they have been taught in schools to who are they? Can you ever imagine one human being doing? Even Hitler did not kill their babies or burn them or torture them like that he is done. And he is occupying the Philadelphia corridor. This is your not father's thing. Now, you signed on the Camp David agreement, and now how dare you take this one? And you can imagine now when he's been cornered by Hezbollah, he is now touching their feet and begging for mercy, that let's have a ceasefire even after 24 hours. Wait, you damn it. See when your Tel Aviv is flattened like Gaza, and nature, by the grace of Almighty Allah, the creator of this universe, you will live to see that the whole of what you call Zionist state, an artificial illegitimate state, an apartheid state, where you were proud to put settlements so that you could destroy single-handedly any prospect of peace and two states, you will see right in front of your eyes your own people strangulating you, killing you, your wife and your son, and all your defense counsel, and all those, that guy with a pot thumb going with his shoes on into the most sacred mosque of the Muslims, the Al-Aqsa Mosque. You've done the dirtiest, the filthiest, and spit it on the face of Christians. You've done and hated, and you taught your kids how to hate Muslims and Arabs. Imagine that how ungrateful you beasts are, because it was the companion of the Prophet, the Caliph Umar, who allowed you to come even enter in Jerusalem and worship. And that's what you give in return, and this is what you have given in return to the sleepy Joe, who gave you the damn bumps of 5,000 pounds so that you can kill their women and children and unarmed civilians and destroy their hospitals, destroy their roads, their homes, their habitat. Even you poison their wells and put cement in them to close them, and you stop their electricity, stop their water, destroyed their sewerage, and they are living like a worm in the heaps and dumps of the sewerage, which has not been removed for the last 1 year. Imagine what kind of reaction will you have when you push someone against the barbed wire, and the wires, the spikes pierce your skin and the blood starts to come out. They'll push you back, no matter how decent, how good, how tolerant they are. So note the bloody word. The word did not start on October the 7th. It was the thing what you've been doing to them, that the bubble burst because of all the cruelty for 75 years you did, and you are doing the same thing to the people in this, in West Bank. And what is it you want to do? How you can occupy the people, homes, and they not have any reaction? They'll push you back. You are cutting with electrical saw their olives, on which their livelihood depends, their, grapes. You've taken their land, you've taken their homes, you have stripped their daughters, their mothers, you have raped their kids which in their detention, helpless. So you are a beast. You are not a man at all. If you were, fight. If you are strong enough, you will win, but you are not. Your diaper idea, and all those kids and the girls who rape men, to look at those Jewish girls in the detention camps. They want the Palestinians and some people to have sexual relationship. So that's what's a dirty, filthy nation you are. why the world should not dig up your graves? Is there any other nation whose graves are dug and they are spitted upon, or they're burnt, or they've been removed out of the whole world? Is crazy that out of 48 countries you've been thrown back. Ask the ultra-Orthodox Jews. They say that you cannot be given a home. God had,
Basic answers to questions you have about Lebanon and Israel? Let's go. Why is Israel attacking Lebanon? One thing you should know is that Lebanon, like Palestine, was also occupied by Israel. And even though Israel says it's targeting Hezbollah, it's been dropping bombs on Lebanese civilians for decades. Now, you could trace these attacks back to October. That's when the group Hezbollah launched rockets over the border as a warning to Israel to stop its assault on Palestinians in Gaza. Since then, the two sides have traded attacks and forced thousands of people on both sides of the border to leave their homes. But there's more to it than that. So what's the backstory? When militias forced Palestinians from their homes in 1948 to create Israel, many refugees fled north to Lebanon, but they never stopped resisting. By the 1970s, the PLO, that's the Palestine Liberation Organization, was operating almost entirely from Lebanon. Israel used that as a reason to invade the country during the chaos of its civil war, and it went on to occupy southern Lebanon for almost 20 years. That's why a small group of Lebanese fighters got together to resist Israel's occupation. Hezbollah is that small group of Lebanese fighters. Hezbollah forced Israel out of Lebanon in 2000, making it the first Arab army to force Israel out of Arab land. And with help from Iran, it's developed into one of the most powerful groups in the region. But there's more to it than a military wing. Hezbollah has a legitimate political party in the country's parliament, and it's a key provider of social and public services to Lebanese civilians. We're talking about basic things like medical care, electricity, and housing subsidies. So is Israel trying to occupy Lebanon again? Israel has de facto declared war on Lebanon, claiming Hezbollah is hiding behind civilians. And the US has enabled Israel's attacks with an almost constant stream of weapons and political cover throughout the war on Gaza. So while international human rights groups and UN experts have repeatedly said Israel's committing genocide against Palestinians, Israel's taking pages from its Gaza playbook to justify its massive attack.
Lockheed Martin reached an all-time high on the equity markets in New York. This just after Foreign Minister of Saudi Arabia blamed Israel for the continuing violence in the Middle East. And all of this, of course, after the worst atrocity in Beirut since Lebanon defeated nuclear-armed Israel in 2006. The rumors flooded the internet that this was a strike on the leader of Lebanese resistance. Anyone wants to know who Hassan Nasrallah is, look up an old interview that Julian Assange did with Nasrallah of the Lebanese resistance movement, and how he's very different, arguably, to how he's portrayed in NATO nation media. This has been a terrible atrocity, piling on the atrocities of the Israeli government. But the main issue here is, just as in the pager atrocity, lauded in NATO propaganda media as being innovative, not understanding that those tactics of supply chain interference will one day destroy ordinary civilians' lives in the capitals of NATO countries, there were American warships, there were American planes off the coast of Beirut ahead of that pager atrocity. And now we hear directly that there were planes, warplanes, surveillance planes, jammer planes, AWACS planes off the coast of Beirut, switching off their transponders on and off before the 2,000-pound American bunker buster bomb destroyed buildings in densely populated areas of the capital of Lebanon, Beirut, ostensibly for an assassination strike. The way the NATO propaganda media treat it as if this is completely normal. We should no doubt expect the enemies of Britain, the United States and the European Union to have assassination strikes for revenge purposes because of what they've done to peoples in the global south. No, this is escalation, and continued escalation. It's benefiting the arms companies, it's benefiting the donors of both parties in the United States. And just as client states like Britain use Cyprus and the Akrotiri base to enable and facilitate the genocide in Gaza and across Palestine, the United States is hand in glove with operations in Beirut, whether it be the pager atrocity or it be the destructive force of the 2,000-pound bomb in Beirut on Friday night. So, don't believe what Lloyd Austin says at the Pentagon. Even Israeli channels and Israeli sources are quoted in Israeli media. They inform the United States. And just to laugh at the way the United States is continuing to enforce the genocide, Netanyahu posed for a picture as if he gave the order for the atrocity in Beirut on Friday night, just after his speech to the UN General Assembly, when all those diplomats, when the global south, when most of the world who support Palestine, not the US and its proxy, walked out. Well, we'll have to wait and see. What will Hezbollah's next move be? Already, as I'm speaking to you, there are meetings convened in Tehran, and the cities of northern Israel, so-called, are already under attack.
Israel is once again rejecting global calls for a ceasefire. But this time they're not for Gaza. No, they're for Lebanon, where Israel has now launched a violent and reckless escalation in their almost year-long crossfire battle with Hezbollah. Israel, of course, took that crossfire to a whole new level last week when they made hundreds of pagers suddenly explode across Lebanon after planting explosives in them, injuring thousands and killing a dozen people, including 2 children and 4 healthcare workers. Not only did Israel then continue to set off even more explosives in Lebanon in what they claimed was the targeting of Hezbollah fighters, but this past Monday, they went even further, launching the most horrific and deadly airstrikes in Lebanon yet, killing even more civilians and overwhelming the country's hospitals. But Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has told Israel's military to continue fighting on with, quote, full force as they prepare for a potential ground invasion and continue to launch deadly strikes deep inside of Lebanon. So, as Israel engages in a new wave of blatant propaganda to try and justify the spilling of even more Arab blood, here are the 5 things that they're not telling you about their horrific assault on Lebanon. The 5 things you need to know to cut through the BS. Number 1, most of the attacks have been from Israel, not Hezbollah. Despite what Israel wants you to believe, this is not a case of a besieged Jewish state suddenly defending itself after showing restraint for months and months. No, since the fighting between Israel and Hezbollah began on October the 8th, Israel has carried out 82% of all the attacks between the two sides, according to ACLED, a very respected non-profit monitoring group, which has even been funded by the US State Department and the German government in the past. Oh, and those numbers don't even include the pagers and walkie-talkies that blew up and killed people, or even the huge numbers of Israeli strikes from this past week that killed huge numbers of people. So can we please stop talking about Israeli restraint? Number 2, and on that note, Israel is killing Lebanese civilians. A lot of them. Just take a look at Monday, when Israel's airstrikes on Lebanon killed over 550 people, including 50 children and 94 women, marking Lebanon's deadliest day in decades. And no, the rest of those killed weren't a bunch of Hezbollah fighters either. According to Lebanese Health Minister Dr. Firas Abiad, the, quote, overwhelming majority, if not all, of the dead were civilians. And before people try to dismiss those numbers, as they do in Gaza when they say you can't trust a Hamas-controlled health ministry, the health ministry in Lebanon isn't controlled by Hezbollah, and Dr. Abiad is not affiliated with Hezbollah in any way. Don't just take it from me, take it from the super pro-Israel New York Times, which pointed out that Dr. Abiad is generally considered apolitical and won praise and prominence for his data-driven assessments during the coronavirus pandemic. Number 3, the human shields excuse really doesn't work in Lebanon. In a video message on Monday, Netanyahu told the Lebanese people that Hezbollah is apparently using them as, wait for it, human shields. How original. But just a few days before that, former Israeli military spokesman Jonathan Conricus actually went on Piers Morgan's show and told the viewers the exact opposite. Have a listen.
Here in Lebanon, until now, the situation is that Hezbollah has so far distinguished itself from civilian population. Israel has been able to take out more than 500 Hezbollah operatives, and with absolutely minimal collateral damage in Lebanon. Hezbollah hasn't been hiding amongst civilians yet.
You heard that, right? Not only does Israel know Hezbollah is not using their civilians as human shields, but Conricus is even admitting that his government knows how to avoid, quote, collateral damage. So all the Lebanese civilians killed by Israeli airstrikes this week, I guess they were just for shits and giggles. Number 4, yet more genocidal rhetoric from Israel. The Israeli government wants you to believe that this is all about security, about protecting ordinary Israelis at the northern border, and that this war isn't against Lebanon or the people of Lebanon, but only against Hezbollah. The problem is that, like with Gaza, their ministers can't stop sounding genocidal in public when they talk about Lebanon. Just have a listen to what Israel's education minister, Yoav Kish, had to say on a live television interview just a few days ago.
אין שום הבדל בין חיזבאללה ללבנון. לבנון תושמד לאור כמו שהדברים... לא תהיה אותה לבנון כמו שהם מכירים. אני לא הולך להתעסק בצייד קטיושות של חיזבאללה. את המחיר לתוקפנות מאדמת לבנון תשלם מדינת לבנון.
Annihilated, he said. Annihilated. Yes, despite Netanyahu claiming that Israel's war is just against Hezbollah, Kish purposely made it clear, very clear, that in reality they're not even going to try and do targeted attacks on only Hezbollah. Their plan is to do to Lebanon what they've done to Gaza, plain and simple. Then there is Israel's Diaspora Affairs Minister, Amichai Chikli, who took to Twitter and claimed that, quote, Lebanon, even though it has a flag and even though it has political institutions, does not meet the definition of a country. How's that for genocidal? Lebanon isn't even a real country, apparently. Sounds like Vladimir Putin talking about Ukraine. Chikli went on to propose kicking Lebanese citizens, the Shia ones, out of parts of southern Lebanon and turning those parts into, quote, buffer zones, which would be controlled by the Israeli military, and which we know is just a polite code word for ethnic cleansing, followed by illegal Israeli settlements. Number 5, you want to talk about terrorism? It's Israel that's committing terrorism. Let's state the obvious. If Hezbollah set off a pager to explode in an Israeli grocery store or in an American hospital, there's no way that American senators like John Fetterman would have praised those attacks. They would be denouncing them as a new age of illegal terrorism. They'd be calling in the CIA. And yet just listen to what former CIA director Leon Panetta said about Israel's terrorist attack with exploding pagers.
The ability to be able to place an explosive in technology that is very prevalent these days, and turn it into a war of terror, really, a war of terror. This is something new.
Is it terrorism?
I don't think there's any question that it's a form of terrorism.
Yes, even the former director of the CIA thinks Israel has opened a new Pandora's box when it comes to acts of terror. But hey, it's all just self-defense, right? Look, as we've seen with Gaza, no matter how horrific or violent or illegal Israel's attacks get, no matter how genocidal the Israeli rhetoric gets, the Israeli government will always find a way to play the victim card and get the uncritical and credulous support of both Western politicians and Western media. We already have over 40,000 dead in Gaza. To avoid a similar number in Lebanon in the coming days and weeks, all of us need to make sure that our leaders and influencers don't fall for the same pro-war propaganda again.
Palestinians had every right to do what they did on October the 7th. Israel has been under the UN Charter as an occupying power and under Geneva since 1967. It has never fulfilled its responsibilities as an occupying power, never intended to fulfill them. In fact, it has dispossessed the Palestinians of their lands, of their orchards, destroyed their homes, killed their children. It is an irresponsible, under the law, occupying power. Therefore, the Palestinians had every right to do what they did on October the 7th. Every time that F-16 flies over Gaza and drops that 250-pound bomb and kills that child, you are guilty, America. You are as guilty as Bibi, as anybody in that right-wing Likud administration. You are just as guilty because you are enabling it. They could not do it without you.
By a strange paradox, the authors who stand for the conventional thesis of a CIA conspiracy build their case on the biography of Oswald, while at the same time claiming that Oswald had almost nothing to do with the killing. It is about as useful as scrutinizing Osama bin Laden's biography to solve 9/11. If Oswald was just a patsy, as he claimed, the quest for the real culprits must logically begin by investigating the man who shot Oswald 2 days after his arrest in the Dallas police station, thus preventing a judgment that would have revealed the weakness of the accusation against Oswald. Oswald's assassin is known as Jack Ruby, but few people know that his real name was Jacob Leon Rubinstein, that he was the son of Jewish Polish immigrants, and that, to the Warren Commission, he had explained his presence in the police station as a Yiddish translator for Israeli reporters. Originally from Chicago, Ruby was a member of the Jewish underworld, known as the Yiddish Connection. His mentor was Los Angeles gangster Mickey Cohen, whom he had known and admired since 1946. Cohen was the successor of the famed Benjamin Siegelbaum, known as Bugsy, one of the bosses of Murder Incorporated, the most brutal crime syndicate in the US. Mickey Cohen was in contact with Menahem Begin, the former Irgun chief, a specialist of false flag terrorism. Cohen was infatuated with the Zionist cause, as he explained in his memoir, quote, "Now I got so engrossed with Israel that I actually pushed aside a lot of my activities and done nothing but what was involved with this Irgun war." End of quote. We also know that Ruby phoned Al Gruber, a Mickey Cohen associate, just after Oswald's arrest. Most probably, that is when he received an offer that he couldn't refuse, for reasons possibly linked to his heavy debt. Ruby died from a rapidly spreading cancer in 1967, so he wouldn't have been around for a new trial under Robert Kennedy's presidency. Yet his Irgun connections and some of his recorded statements were highly disturbing. Ruby's defense lawyer William Kunstler wrote in his memoir that Ruby told him he had killed Oswald, quote, "for the Jews," and Ruby's rabbi Hillel Silverman received the same confession when visiting Ruby in jail. Ruby is only an intermediary link in a conspiracy that begins with the ambush of Dallas, extends to the cover-up of the Warren Commission, and involves a pact of silence with the directions of the major media. At every level of the conspiracy, we find the fingerprints of the Israeli deep state. Let's begin with the Dallas ambush. JFK's trip to Dallas had no official character and was sponsored by a powerful business group known as the Dallas Citizens Council. Kennedy was on his way to the reception organized in his honor when he was shot. The Dallas Citizens Council was a powerful group dominated by Jewish businessmen like the wealthy Julius Shepps, described by Brian Edward Stone in The Chosen Folks, Jews on the Frontiers of Texas as, quote, "a member of every synagogue in the city and de facto leader of the Jewish community," end of quote. Abraham Zapruder, the man who filmed the assassination of John Kennedy and sold his film for $150,000 to Life magazine, was also a member of the Dallas Citizens Council. He was a clothing manufacturer whose headquarters happened to be located in the Dallas Textile Building, or Daltex, where one of the snipers' nests was located, according to JFK researchers who have studied the firing trajectories. Interviewed the same day on television, Zapruder could not hide his satisfaction. The host committee inviting Kennedy was chaired by another influential figure of the wealthy Jewish community in Dallas, advertising executive and PR man Sam Bloom. According to former British intelligence officer Colonel John Hugh Wilson, it was Bloom who, quote, suggested that the police make Oswald accessible to the press. He also suggested, against the explicit advice of the local FBI, that they move the alleged assassin from the Dallas police station to the Dallas County Jail in order to give the newsman a good story and pictures, end of quote. It was during this transfer that Oswald was shot by Ruby. Hugh Wilson also writes, when the police later searched Ruby's home, they found a slip of paper with Bloom's name, address and telephone number on it. After the Dallas tragedy, Israel's Zionim were also busy fabricating the official lie. Apart from the chairman, Earl Warren, chosen for his figurative role as Chief Justice, all key people in the investigative commission were either personal enemies of Kennedy, like Allen Dulles, the CIA director fired by Kennedy in 1961, or ardent Zionists, like Arlen Specter, who, at his death in 2012, was mourned by the Israeli government as, quote, an unswerving defender of the Jewish state, end of quote. Arlen Specter was the inventor of what came to be called the magic bullet theory, a single bullet supposed to have caused 7 wounds to John Kennedy and John Connally sitting before him in the limousine, and later found in pristine condition on a gurney in Parkland Memorial Hospital in Dallas. In conclusion, at every step of the plot, we find a Zionist cabal, including businessmen, politicians, and gangsters, not forgetting media executives, all devoted to Israel. The most plausible motive for Israel to kill Kennedy has been revealed by 2 books in the 1990s, The Samson Option by Seymour Hersh, then Israel and the Bomb by Avner Cohen. And the lead has been followed up in 2007 by Michael Karpin in The Bomb in the Basement. What these investigators reveal is that John Kennedy, informed by the CIA in 1960 that Israel was developing its own nuclear weapons in the Dimona complex in the Negev desert, was firmly determined to force Israel to renounce it, and engaged in a showdown with David Ben-Gurion, who was both Israel's prime minister and defense minister. Ben-Gurion was convinced that by trying to prevent Israel from acquiring the bomb, Kennedy was endangering the very survival of the Jewish state, to which he had devoted his entire life. Ben-Gurion wrote in one of his last letters to JFK, "Mr. President, my people has the right to exist, and this existence is in danger." Kennedy, however, remained unyielding. In a letter dated June 15, 1963, he demanded an immediate first visit, followed by regular visits every 6th month. Otherwise, he wrote, his government's commitment to and support of Israel could be seriously jeopardized. The result was unexpected. Ben-Gurion avoided receiving the letter by announcing his resignation on June 16. As soon as a new Prime Minister Levi Eshkol took office, Kennedy sent him a similar letter dated June 5, 1963, but never got an answer. Did Ben-Gurion resign in order to deal with Kennedy from a deeper level? This is not implausible, because 11 days after resigning, Ben-Gurion was more committed than ever to provide Israel with the nuclear weapon. He said in a speech, "I do not know of any other nation whose neighbors declare that they wish to terminate it, and not only declare, but prepare for it by all means available to them. Our numbers are small, and there is no chance that we could compare ourselves with America's 180 million, or with any Arab neighboring state. There is one thing, however, in which we are not inferior to any other people in the world. This is the Jewish brain, and the Jewish brain does not disappoint. Jewish science does not disappoint. I am confident that science is able to provide us with the weapons that will serve the peace and deter our enemies." End of quote. 5 months later, Kennedy's death relieved Israel of all pressure to stop its nuclear program and of all risk of publicity on this program. John McCone, the CIA director named by Kennedy to inform him about Israel's Dimona project, resigned in 1965, complaining about Johnson's complete lack of interest. According to historian Stephen Green, perhaps the most significant development of 1963 for the Israeli nuclear weapons program occurred on November 22. On a plane flying from Dallas to Washington, D.C., Lyndon Johnson was sworn in as the 36th President of the United States following the assassination of John F. Kennedy. Lyndon Johnson's White House saw no Dimona, heard no Dimona, and spoke no Dimona when the reactor went critical in early 1964. End of quote. Kennedy's determination to make Israel's Dimona project abort was only part of the Kennedy problem. Kennedy had committed himself to our
the American Israel Public Affairs Committee. It was incorporated in 1963. For 10 years prior to that, it was known as the American Zionist Committee for Public Affairs. AIPAC calls itself America's pro-Israel lobby, and according to its website, it has over 3 million members across the country in regional chapters working to, quote, expand and strengthen the U.S.-Israel relationship, end quote. You may know AIPAC as being one of the biggest and most recognizable donors to many of the members of Congress in your state. But contributing to campaigns is a relatively new function of the organization. Before 2021, AIPAC did not endorse candidates nor give political contributions. Its focus was on lobbying elected officials, not actually electing officials. But in a dramatic shift in policy, AIPAC began directly funding candidates and spending big on races in 2021. AIPAC Political Action Committee, AIPAC-PAC, filed something called a Statement of Organization with the FEC just in time for the 2022 election cycle, where it spent $50 million, including both direct contributions to candidates and outside spending, like TV advertisements. According to AIPAC, it donated money to 365 candidates from both parties, including every single member of both Democratic and Republican leadership in Congress. 109 Republicans who voted against the certification of the 2020 presidential election in America received campaign contributions from AIPAC. All in all, AIPAC gave money to 342 members of the 118th Congress. The 2022 elections were the most expensive midterms in American history, with a total cost of $8.9 billion spent. Now, last year, AIPAC ranked 15th in total expenditure by a political action committee, according to data collected by Open Secrets. But take a look at the other funders that AIPAC is competing against for that title. Act Blue and Win Red. They are Democratic and Republican Party machines. Save America is Donald Trump's money-raising operation. The Conservative Club for Growth, Emily's List, focuses on electing Democratic women to office. All of the PACs on this list are massively domestic-focused ideological machines. AIPAC is the only organization in the top 20 whose interests are focused entirely on America's relationship to a foreign government. Now, let's take a look at who benefits from AIPAC's largesse. Here are the top 20 recipients in Congress, the House and the Senate, of AIPAC money in the 2022 midterm cycle, according to Open Secrets. They're members of both parties. They come from every corner of the country with varying levels of experience in Congress. The Democrat Glenn Ivey of Maryland tops the list. He beat out fellow Democrat Donna Edwards in Maryland's House primary after AIPAC poured millions into pro-Ivey advertisements and mailers. Edwards was running for a second stint in Congress after serving during the Obama administration, where she voted present, not even a no, on a number of pro-Israel resolutions. So the money poured in against her. Not even an endorsement from Nancy Pelosi could save her. Michigan Democrat Haley Stevens unseated Democratic Representative Andy Levin. Here's what Levin had to say about that.
I'm really Jewish, but AIPAC can't stand the idea that I am the clearest, strongest Jewish voice in Congress, standing for a simple proposition that there's no way to have a secure democratic homeland for the Jewish people unless we achieve the political and human rights of the Palestinian people.
AIPAC spent $4 million against Levin. He lost by 20 points. When Michigan Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib, the only Palestinian American in Congress, was censured by the House in early November over what some lawmakers called her rhetoric around the Israeli-Hamas war, 22 Democrats joined Republicans in that censure vote. 18 of those Democrats received campaign funds from AIPAC in 2022, totaling more than $1.1 million. By the way, for these 6 of them, AIPAC was their top contributor. A growing list of progressive lawmakers who are vocal in their criticism of the government of Israel and its policies and their support for Palestinian self-determination have inspired AIPAC to spend even more. As progressive lawmakers began calling for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza, Slate reported that insiders expect AIPAC's 2024 spending to hit $100 million. In fact, United Democracy Project, which is a pro-Israel super PAC affiliated with AIPAC, is already spending money on attack ads against Democratic Representatives Jamal Bowman of New York and Summer Lee of Pennsylvania. Lee has already got a primary challenger, as do Cori Bush and Ilhan Omar. Pro-Israel donors have already signaled that they are eager to primary Rashida Tlaib and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Congresswoman Lee already overcame AIPAC's financial influence against her once. She tweeted criticisms of Israel's treatment of Palestinians in 2021, but as a candidate, she affirmed Israel's right to exist. But that's not good enough. AIPAC spent nearly $3 million in the primary alone to defeat Lee, and they almost did. She beat Stephen Irwin, who is third on the list of money given to candidates by AIPAC in 2022, by less than 1,000 votes. And if Congresswoman Lee wants to keep her seat in 2024, she's going to have to do it all over again. She joins me in studio after this break.
यूनिवर्सल टेलीविजन को सब्सक्राइब करना ना भूलें, उसके बाद बेल बटन पे क्लिक करें और अपने कमेंट्स के सेक्शन में अपने कीमती जो ख्यालात का इजहार जरूर